This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leaders, today I'm honored to have Karin Hurt and David Dye on the show. They are renowned leadership experts in workplace culture, coaches and leaders, and they help people like me that need help with some things. And today we're going to talk about powerful phrases for dealing with workplace conflict, which is their latest book. And anyway, with all that being said, we're going to get into this deeply in just a minute. So welcome, Karin and David.
Thanks so much for having us.
Pleasure to be with you.
Hi. If you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background and kind of how you got to where you are today in your careers and why you guys decided to put together this book.
Okay, so we run a company called Let's Grow Leaders, which is known for very practical tools and techniques for human-centered leaders, leadership development that sticks. And we're a husband and wife team. And before founding Let's Grow Leaders, David and I were both executives. So I was at Verizon for 2 decades. So if you start to add up this, we start to sound old, but 2 decades at Verizon, 11 years at Let's Grow Leaders. But we really noticed a significant pattern after the pandemic, right? That people were having more conflict and the nature of the conflict was a bit different. And so, David, you want to just share a little bit about why we wrote Powerful Phrases?
Yeah, when we see all of that happening, the other aspect for us is that we believe in the power of meaningful conversations. And we also believe that when you engage in conflict constructively, it doesn't have to be destructive. It doesn't have to damage relationships. It can do the opposite. It can build relationships, build collaboration, build creativity. But so many of our clients over the past couple of years, as they've talked to us about these things, have said, Karin and David, can you please just give me the words? I need the words to say to open the door to a meaningful conversation. And so that's why we wrote this book, is to give people the practical words to open the door to good conversations that are going to be helpful.
I think that's great. And that's one of the things that so I'm very, what do you call it? It's not like I'm nervous around people all the time, but conflict terrifies me. And I have no idea why. Even as a leader, I know I need healthy conflict. There was a book that I read probably 5 or 6 years ago called Herding Tigers by Todd Henry. And he talked about how if you're leading great talent, and you don't have conflict in your team, you have a problem, and you have to have that conflict. And I always tried, as a new manager to avoid conflict and stop it, end it. But then I realized that sometimes it's necessary. You have to have these things. And I didn't know how to have the words. So putting something like this in front of me would be extraordinarily helpful because I do struggle with coming out how to start something. And I do that with a lot of things, even one-on-ones. I had no idea how to have an effective one-on-one with a person until I found something that had a list. Ask this question, ask this question, ask this question. Oh, I can do that. I can have that. And then I learned how to adapt it to my own culture and my own team.
Yeah, excellent. The book is designed you can read it through and, it's grounded in research and we give you the dimensions of conflict and why it all matters. But it's also designed as somebody just called it a choose your own adventure. So You can go to the table of contents. And if you are in an acute conflict emergency, right, something just happened and you need the words, you just flip to that chapter and we give you a menu of words to choose from that would be helpful to have the conversation.
Awesome. So let's go through one right now that I want to just to practice along and see how I would apply this in real life. So let's assume that I am, head of technology for a company and we're in our building and all of a sudden we have a power outage or something like that. And we switch over to generator and everything seems to work fine. And then we realize that our internet's not working. What do? We figure out that our internet's not working. We have this conflict that we have to deal with. Whose fault is it? Why is this not working? Why wasn't this tested in our disaster recovery plan? What's going on? And then obviously we fix the issue and where do we start from there? Like, how do we bring this up in a respectful way that's not like pointing fingers, blaming, putting people down, and things like that?
You know, it's such a real life scenario, right? We all, whether we're in, the specific space of being responsible for that or not, have those situations where it's like, oh my goodness, how did this happen? Mm-hmm. And it's easy to start casting blame. It's just human nature. We're frustrated. We're fearful. What's going to happen to me as a result of this, all that kind of thing. And yet, if we can put ourselves in the space of curiosity, so when we talk about the 4-dimension collaboration, let's just run through those real quick because they all apply in this scenario. The first one is connection. Do we know each other as human beings? Are we connected to one another as human beings? 2, clarity. So do we have a shared understanding of success? 3rd is curiosity. Are we asking good questions? And those in this case are going to be forward-looking questions. Who did what went wrong, all of that. Casting blame doesn't help us build anything for the future. It may help somebody feel like they're avoiding risk in this moment, but it doesn't help build anything for the future. And that's where, in this situation, where we want to put our focus. And then 4th is commitment. And this is how you take all that conversation and turn it into something that actually results in action taking place and changes happening in the future. So as you work through these dimensions in this case, so we're starting as human beings, like, hey, listen, this stinks. Let's just acknowledge the emotion of it. This was hard. This shouldn't have happened. It stinks. And none of us feel good about that. And we're all in this together. And I'm confident we can find a solution moving forward. So let's connect to each other as human beings to begin with. Mm-hmm. Clarity. What does success look like? Let's get clear about what we need to do to, what does success look like going forward? Is this can't happen again. So let's figure out what can we learn from that. All right, now let's get to curiosity, start asking those questions. All right, what did happen? Let's also ask what went right. So often in our post-analysis of things, we forget to ask what went right, and we're not learning from that too. So what went right? What worked? All right, what didn't work? What was missing? What redundancy wasn't there? What responsibility hadn't been assigned or hadn't been followed through on? And if there is a personnel issue in that, okay, we can identify that, but not from a blame game, but from an accountability, responsibility perspective. Yeah. And then once we've asked those questions and got some good answers, then in the commitment phase, we do something we call it schedule to finish, which is put time on the calendar where we're both or all of us going to look at the agreement we've made and make sure we're following through on it. So that's just an example of how those 4 phases briefly might approach a situation like this.
Gotcha. So when I'm thinking about going through this in real life, one of the things that you hit on that is interesting, you said acknowledge the emotion. Bring up that this sucks. This was difficult. And a lot of times people don't want to bring emotions into the workplace. There's some, I had a boss a while back. This is at a previous, engagement decade ago, who was all about you can't show any emotions while you're at work. You can't get frustrated. You can't get mad. You have to be stoic and okay, I kind of get that, but we are people, right? So how do we effectively bring emotions in without overreacting and things like that?
The truth is you have emotions, right? To say you can't have emotions. What he's really saying is you don't have emotions, right?
Robots.
Right. But the truth is, if you show zero emotion, people won't trust you because, and we actually had someone say, I think, my boss is like a robot. He used those words just like you did. Yeah. And so the thing is, you don't want to be hysterical. You can show emotions, but you do not want to be hysterical, right? So, you could say, I am really frustrated about this. We can't have no internet. That is, success looks like, as David says, success looks like this never happens again, right?
Right.
But you can say that in a calm, collected, executive presence way without screaming and what the F happened, and right? And so I think when you're saying what he's saying, no emotions, I think he's saying, can you keep executive presence, right? Can you stay calm? Because actually adding to the intensity of the situation never helped anyone, right? Screaming at people doesn't help. So, but you can still be incredibly intense and let people understand the gravity of things. David is way better at doing this than me. My first reaction is to fire up, and it takes every ounce of energy to calm it down. David's tendency is to start calm. So I'm going to let him, since he's better at this, tell you how he does that.
Well, I think, John, some of this is just knowing your natural tendency and where you tend to come from, right? So as much as Karen's, I might say she fires up, sometimes I have to bring the emotion consciously to the conversation because it's not my default style. And so knowing who you are and what you need to bring or not bring or where you need to adjust the dials to be most effective as a leader, that's what this is all about, as you're leading and guiding your team through these conversations.
Yeah. So a big part about powerful phrases is knowing the right words to say and being able to communicate. And sometimes, like you said, bringing the right emotion in will help you connect with someone so that you can communicate. How important is building those connections ahead of a crisis or ahead of the conflict in the first place?
So important. So important. So just think about it this way. So imagine that you are in a conflict, and so you think somebody's coworker named Joe stole your idea. All right. You're pretty sure Joe stole your idea and you are mad. Okay. Now, if Joe comes and uses a powerful phrase, one of our GOATs, greatest of all times, hey, I really care about you, and I'm confident we can find a solution here. Well, if last week Joe got you out of a jam when your little kid was sick, he told your boss how good you are at pivot tables, you're like, all right, Joe is a pretty nice guy. I'm confident we can work this out too. But if Joe threw you under the bus in your last staff meeting, you're like, nice try. Hard no, Joe. Right? I don't trust you. So powerful phrases won't work if people don't trust your intentions. Mm-hmm. And that comes with how are you showing up. So it is so important. Brene Brown says that it's hard to hate people up close. Mm-hmm. And I think that is so true. If you know somebody as a human being, if you know a little bit about their values, it is so much easier. And it doesn't take that long. We have an exercise that we often will do when we're teaching hybrid or remote teams. And we just, at the beginning of the training, say, what is one thing that you're particularly proud of, personally or professionally, that's happened in the last 6 months? Pop people into breakout rooms for 5 minutes. They come back and they're like, you could just see everybody's face is different. Like people have relaxed. And then we say, all right, how many of you learned something about a coworker that you didn't know before? Everybody raises their hand, right? 5 minutes. It doesn't take long to build these connections.
And when you're talking about emotion and connection, one of the most important emotions in any conversation is what the other person is feeling. Mm-hmm. And so one of the powerful phrases that we recommend is in any conversation you're in where there's any emotion at all is to reflect that emotion and check and make sure that you're picking up whatever they're feeling. And so the phrase we recommend is along the lines of, it sounds to me like you're feeling blank. Do I have that right? Wow, it sounds like you're really excited about this opportunity. Is that right? It sounds to me like you're super frustrated about this situation or really disappointed in what happened here. Do I have that right? And when we do that, it's the other person is seen. It's one of the fastest ways that we can build connection at that level of emotion, lowers the intensity of that emotion, and again, starts to open those doors for more productive conversations.
Yeah, I think that's a really good phrase. And that's one thing that, you can use not only at work, but also in your personal life too. Like, when your kids are talking to you, maybe you're trying to relate to them and, calm them down, help them understand what's going on. That's a great phrase to use there too. And there's a lot of parallels, I think, between like parenting and work that I notice a lot when I hear these things, because I have 3 kids and I always try to see what can I take from work and bring home to help with my family there as well.
Absolutely. It's funny. Almost everybody who reads the book is telling us that, oh, this will work at home too.
Yes. Yeah. What would you guys say to teams? Because I've met with many people, and honestly, I felt this way, like I said earlier in the conversation when I was a new manager, that conflict was bad and I needed to stop conflict. And I want a team that works well together and we don't need any conflict. What would you say to that leader that's trying to squash all the conflict?
The conflict in and of itself can be negative or positive. And so most often when we think, when you start a jump by saying, hey, I'm fearful of conflict, I don't like it, stay away from it. Yeah, me too. And that's when we're thinking about that, it's destructive conflict. It's the things that really tear us down and tear one another down and all that kind of, no one needs that. And we need less of that in the workplace. And that's where so many of us, when we hear the word conflict, naturally go. But if we're having a creative conversation about, wow, what's the architecture that might help us to achieve that outcome? Or gosh, what's a more efficient way we could do X, Y, or Z? Or what if we could cut out some of these steps that we're taking now? And how much time would that save us? And we have some difference of opinion on that. All of those are conflict conversations that make us better. And that if we know how to engage in them and really figure out what problems we're trying to solve for one another, we can craft better solutions, more lasting solutions, solutions that are more robust, resilient, and that we're more committed to. We need that, and all of us want those outcomes, but it takes having the conversations to get there. And so that's the kind of conflict that we're talking about. So another way to think about productive conflict, it's collaboration, and that's what we're going for here.
Yeah. So what's the difference between conflict and collaboration?
So one of the main things is collaboration is focused on solving the problem that we're both looking at together. Mm-hmm. Destructive conflict, usually we turn the other person into a problem. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of reasons that happens, but one of the most common is that we have a lack of clarity about what success looks like. So when we go to that second dimension that we talked about, one of our favorite questions there, a powerful phrase for dealing with workplace conflict related to clarity, what successful outcome do for you? Mm-hmm. Because what happens so often is we say, well, hey, what do you need to happen here? And somebody says, well, this is my solution. And then you're like, well, no, this is my solution. And now we're locked into a debate about which solution we're going to go for. And now we're automatically in conflict. And pretty soon, human tendencies, if we don't feel respected, I'm feeling unsafe, and now the other person's a problem, it becomes destructive. Right. Well, a good clarity question helps us prevent that. What would a successful outcome do for you? Now I know the problem you're actually trying to solve. And if I can put that, what would a successful outcome do for me, into the conversation too, now we have the chance to start crafting a solution that can work for both of us. But until we have that information in our conversation together, we can't create that solution.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I think that's one of the things that, I personally struggle with is, when I hear someone says, hey, I need this thing, I'm a fixer, so I want to go and fix it. I'll give you that thing and not think about what is the end result? Because, I can think back to a project, a couple, probably 12 years ago now. We were building a mobile app for a group of technicians that drove around in trucks, and they fixed problems, just a normal technician. And one of the things that they were asking for is like, hey, can you just move this button from the bottom of your closed form to the top of the closed form? And at the time, we just sure, that's an easy fix. We'll just do that. But I was reading something about asking why. So I thought, well, I'm going to use this as an example to figure out what the why behind this. I think I was reading Thomas Sinek's book or something like that. Start with why. So what's the why behind this? And I kept asking, and they're like, well, because it's easier. Like, why is it easier? I wanted to find the root of the cause. And what the real problem was is that these technicians would get 10 or 12 tickets a day that they would go and work. And I found out that they never closed them when they finished the ticket. They waited till the end of the day, because if they did something and they closed the ticket and then the customer called them right back and said, hey, something's still not working, they would have to create a new ticket, go back. It would be a big mess, a big hassle. So they wanted to leave the ticket open until the end of that day and then close them all at once. So the real answer was, let's create a batch close system, not just move the button to the top so they didn't have to scroll through that on their phone. So asking those whys and finding out what the real solution was is kind of like that, what you're talking about, that collaboration piece.
That is such an excellent example. Yeah.
It's exactly it. What would a successful outcome do for you is a way to ask why, particularly as you're managing up. And we have a lot of chapters in the book about managing up. You got a micromanager, a boss who won't make a decision, lots of different kinds of scenarios like that. That question of what would a successful outcome do for you is a huge one as you're managing up that you can ask your boss, because sometimes asking your boss hey, why do you want that, boss? Some managers will get defensive when you ask that way, but asking, hey, what would a successful outcome do for you here? Boom. Now I'm trying to solve your problem.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question. It may or may not be in the book. I don't know, but it's just something that I kind of struggle with as a leader. When you're leading, let's say, a team, and you also have to manage up. You have to manage down and up. How do you know when's too much managing up and when's not enough? Because sometimes, you don't want to overstep your bounds and like direct your boss, or you don't want to have any manipulation in there. You want to be very genuine and honest and discreet. But you also know I need to direct this in a certain path because I'm closer to the problem than they are at this moment. So how do you know when's enough?
Right. Well, I think it's really, what is the outcome that you're looking to achieve? And, to be really, really clear on that. Is it that you just want them off your back? Or is that there's something that is, so I would go to the bigger concern. Why does what you have to say matter in this situation? What's at stake if you stay silent? Is this a big enough issue that you want to bring it up? Because that's also part of it. You don't want to be, there's a difference between speaking up and complaining about every little thing. And so, taking a step back and saying, what do I really want in this relationship? And deal with the bigger macro issues. And then you can use the things that have happened as examples in the conversation and asking for what you need. But it's better to have one bigger conversation. Hey, I've noticed that when you keep coming to me for updates on this project. In fact, this particular project, you've come to me 5 times in the last 2 days. I really care about you. I care about our work together, and I really want to give you what you need. So I'm curious, when you're coming to me with these updates, what does success look like? What do you really need here? And is there a way, get curious, is there a way that I can be more proactive giving you what you need so that you don't feel compelled to keep asking me? Because what it looks like to be me in this situation is every time you come to me and ask me for an update, I have to stop what I'm doing, go get the project team involved, get updates from them, and it's slowing everything down. So what is a way that we could do this to meet your needs and also meet what I need to keep the team focused on the work? And so I think it's those kinds of, bigger picture conversations that make the biggest difference when managing up.
And if you take another like common managing up situation where your boss is asking for something and it's like, oh my gosh, this is going to derail what is actually most important here in terms of the project plan we have. Like, okay, what do I do there? And striking that balance is about giving your manager the information they need. You can make a recommendation in that. So, hey, listen, I hear what you're asking for. Let me make sure I'm understanding the reason you're asking for that. Do I have that right? Or if I don't, what would a successful outcome do for you? I get that. Okay. All right. So with that information, here's the deal. Hear what you're saying? We can do that. And if we do, here are the consequences. And I'm concerned about that because it will have the following impact on XYZ. The time frame is going to slip here. There's no way we're getting those iterations in until this. So we're going to need to shift some priorities. All right. I'm just giving information. And sometimes we get frustrated because we're like, well, don't they understand? Don't they get it? No, they don't. They've got all their own realities they're dealing with. And how could they know? Because exactly like you said, you are closest to it. So you have a responsibility to share that information. You're not complaining. You're adding information. And now you can make a recommendation. So the way I see it, it might make sense to XYZ and then get curious. What are your thoughts? How do you see it? What do you think? What would you like us to do here? And then you can have that conversation.
I think that's really good. And I think that's, it's also offering some transparency into the situation because you're sharing with, your point of view with your leader in a way that's open. And that's one of the things you guys talk about in the book is about, creating a culture of open communication, and how is it that, let's say, let me give you an example again, that something that I've dealt with in the past at a previous company where I was very low level manager. My first time being a manager, I managed this web development and mobile development team. And it was at a great company, but the company had a culture of keeping things siloed and keeping things in their groups and don't share this with, don't tell marketing about this or don't tell engineering about this. Let's keep this in our group. But, as a manager, I wanted to instill a culture of that open communication and have that open communication, but I was in an area where I couldn't. How do you do that? And how do you change that culture from the bottom up, or can you?
So I think that's a really tricky one. I think I would go with your whys first. Like, why are we not supposed to tell marketing? Why are we not supposed to tell engineering? Right? Because, so I led some really big teams at Verizon, and sometimes we had, I don't know, I had to sign an NDA about every product. Like I had most of the times I had at least 12 secret squirrel projects that were going on that I was not allowed to talk about. Right. So if there's a reason like that, that makes sense. But if it's like we're worried marketing's going to slow us down or get in the way, or, that I think is then the question is this really serving, is it serving the overall good of this? And then to speak up and say, I hear you, and I'm concerned. If we bring in engineering into too late in the game, we're going to have a lot of rework on our hands. And I get that it might help us go fast to start, but I think it might slow us down. So that's where I would start.
So that's I hear you and I am concerned, right?
Yes.
And it goes back to the question that the example you were getting at with the location of the button on the form and what's the problem they're actually trying to solve, and can we solve that problem? And, and build it. And maybe there's a legitimate concern there about going faster, going slower, but maybe we can build some infrastructure to solve for that, or an approach that says this is when input is cut off here in order to take the next step. Whatever that looks like, there's always a way to have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And but going back to it, now that I know more about what, life was like, from an executive level in that environment, it was more like, if we build this tool for marketing, then we can't tell engineering about it because they're going to want something similar. We don't,
Oh.
It was more about resource planning, but they wanted to be sneaky about it.
Oh, wow.
So I have a couple more questions before we, wrap up. And one of the things that's important to me is, can you elaborate with, kind of some of the importance for addressing conflicts proactively? So like, for example, we mentioned about building that relationship up front, but whenever you set something coming, why should you get ahead of it instead of because as a manager, sometimes I want my team just to kind of, this sounds wrong, but I want them to handle it. I don't want to get in there, but sometimes I feel like I need to step in and address this ahead of time. How do I know when I should and when I shouldn't?
Yeah. Part of it is, I think we all do. This is a human nature. We have this magical thinking. If I ignore this, it will go away. And most conflicts, destructive conflicts, do not get better with time. Surely they knew that they shouldn't have done that way, but they'll do it better. Right? Well, surely they know. So I think that's part of it is, being the sooner you handle something, the easier it will be. And most of the place I would start there is have I set clear expectations, because one of the things that expectation violations cause so much workplace conflict. So if your team is in conflict, the first thing I would say is, have I done anything has my communication been clear about what I expect? Or are they in conflict because of me, right? Is another place that I would start. But the other thing is that there is so much stress when you let conflict simmer, right? And people play out the conflicts in their mind. They assume what the other person is thinking. They avoid it. They lose sleep. They get frustrated. And you're also, by not bringing the conflict up, you're stifling innovation. Because if you're not talking about it, and getting those diversity and the creativity that comes from the other side of it. So that's a number of reasons.
Yeah, I'd throw in some powerful phrases that you can use specifically to tease out whether or not you should get involved as a manager. So chapter 17 in the book actually talks about, hey, if you're leading a team that's having conflict with one another, what should you do? And so a couple of phrases you can use in the start of that conversation, let's say you're talking to a team member or any of your team members, one of them is, what do you want me to know? And that opens the door for them to share whatever is truly meaningful to them about the situation. And then as you learn, you might learn, as Karin said, that you've had unclear expectations and gosh, you need to clarify that. It might still be vague. So you might say then, okay, how might I help here? And sometimes they will just tell you, oh, I just needed to blow off steam. I don't actually need your help. And so I say that's a vent, not an intervention, right? So vent or intervention. If they're just venting, you're done. You've listened, you're good. They're good, back they go. If more is required, one of my favorite powerful phrases in this situation, hey, should the three or more of us talk together? And that's a real clear indicator of whether the person is complaining, trying to undermine somebody, playing politics, or if they genuinely want to solve the problem. If they genuinely want to solve the problem, hey, yeah, I would like the three of us. I think that'd be really helpful. We could clarify some things and move forward together. So those are just a couple of examples of how you can tease out what kind of situation you're in as a manager so that you can make some productive forward progress.
So let me follow up with that just real quick, because sometimes you do have that person that is always oh, no, I don't want you to bring them involved. I was just venting. How much is too much venting? Because sometimes that builds up inside of someone. If they're constantly bringing up that this is a problem, but I don't want you to deal with it. I just want you to know that I think this is a problem. Well, when should we say, okay, enough is enough. Let's get in there and like fix this because this is too much.
Yeah. One of the things is to notice the pattern. So I notice that you keep bringing me these issues and then saying you don't want to deal with them. So what does success look like for you? What do you want? Are you just, it's interesting. We had an engineer in Bristol, England, who told us, sometimes people just want a good moan.
Yeah.
Are you just wanting to complain about this? Because this is getting a little old. I got a lot of things to do. If you would like me to help, this is where the path forward I see here. But this pattern is not productive.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. It's probably way better than the way I handled it. So I need to focus on that a little bit better. No, that's actually very good advice because I've had complainers that worked for me before, and it's just I always let it build up until I just snap and say I need to stop the negativity, stop the complaining. I can't take it anymore. Which is not the right approach. I know because I probably hurt their feelings and ruined a little bit of trust there.
Yeah, and it's just having the right words to say because, sometimes we need to complain. Sometimes a complainer actually wants to make things better, and sometimes a complainer, they're just a complainer, and we shouldn't be giving that any time or extra voice because it just drags us down.
Yeah, absolutely. Just curious, what are the final takeaways that you have for someone that's reading this book and how to implement it on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, where I would start is to pay attention to the dimensions of a workplace conflict. As David said, the connection, clarity, curiosity, commitment. And then as you are entering into a challenging conversation, ask yourself, what is most needed here? Is this should I start with connection? Should I start with curiosity? Do I need to create some clarity? And then we have 12 GOATs, greatest of all time, powerful phrases, that you can use 3 of those for each dimension. And so I would familiarize yourself with the dimensions and a couple of the GOATs, the ones that feel good to you, so that you don't have to think too hard at the beginning to start the conversation, and that you'll have the courage to have the conversation. The most important thing is that you actually have it and have the confidence to start it. And then, so that's really where I would start. And even if you never opened any other of the chapters of the book, those, just getting a couple of those 12 into your mind, I think could really be a good start. And then the next thing I would do is just scan the table of contents so that you know what's there. And so then if you hit a wall or somebody comes bursting into your office or your Zoom meeting and they're ticked off, you could say, oh yeah, there is a scenario in this book for this, and I'm gonna pull what I need from that chapter.
Yeah, so this is definitely one of those books to sit right on the bookshelf, right next to the desk. So whenever you get that Teams message or Zoom, and you're like, "Oh, just grab this."
Exactly.
Awesome. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate having you guys on, and I think I'm learning a lot, and I'm sure our guests are too. I mean, our listeners are too. How can people connect with you online, pick up a copy of the book, and learn more about the things that you guys work on?
Yeah, so thank you so much for having us. The book is called Powerful Phrases for Dealing with Workplace Conflict. And then the subtitle, I think, is important. What to say next to de-stress the workday, build collaboration, and calm difficult customers. So we got some customers and internal and external customer stuff in there too. Our website is letsgrowleaders.com. If you go there are so many free resources. So just go to books. And then there's our Conflict and Collaboration Resource Center is there, which has all kinds of ways for you to really work with your team on this. So you can buy it for your team. You can read it together. And with that, then there's activities and exercises so that you can talk about how you're going to have these conversations before you need to. And so that's where I would start. And of course, the book is available anywhere books are sold, including on Audible, read by us. So most of the time, if you're a podcast listener, you prefer to have an Audible version. So that is as well.
Yeah, I love it when the book is read by the author because when it's read by somebody else and you've listened to a podcast where a lot of times I get my books recommendations from podcasts. So I hear like the author telling about the book. I'm like, oh, great. I'll go download it. And it's like, who's this person?
Who is that?
Like, that's an Australian accent. That guy doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's so funny. Our very first book is called Winning Well. And the first version of that, it was read by somebody else. And it was ridiculous because it was like, and I'm a single mom. And it was this man, you know. And so, we since have the publishers let us read it so that because our other books are people do enjoy to hear it from us. So, yeah.
Yeah. And also, I don't want to miss the opportunity to plug your podcast. You have a podcast, Leadership Without Losing Your Soul. So I definitely want to hit up on that.
Thank you.
All right. I'll link all that up in the show notes too at geekleader.com so you can click through and find it there. Again, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Been our pleasure, John. Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to. Click on their links and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. And make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.